Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving deep today into habits of those things we do almost automatically every single day. And you know what? You sent over this piece from Atomic Habits by James Clear to get us started.
Excellent choice. This book really digs into how these seemingly small actions can make or break us, often without us even realizing it.
Yeah, that's what struck me too when I first read this. It's like compound interest, but for our lives, right?
Exactly.
Clear says these tiny changes, if we do them consistently, they can create massive results over time. He even gives this example. Imagine getting just 1% better each day.
And the math on that is just wild. Do that for a whole year, you end up almost 37 times better. It's not about some huge overnight shift. It's the small stuff we do consistently. Like, imagine you're trying to learn, I don't know, a new language. Instead of those crazy cram sessions that just burn you out, what if you just spent like 15 minutes a day every day?
Right, that's so much less daunting to think about.
Yeah, exactly.
And it makes those big goals feel more attainable. But how do we actually do this? Like, where do we even begin?
Well, Clear lays out this great framework. He calls it the four laws of behavior change. They're pretty simple when you first hear them, but they're powerful. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying, almost like a recipe for building good habits.
Okay, I'm hooked already. Let's break these down one by one. First up, make it obvious. What does that even mean when we're talking about habits?
It's all about being aware of your current habits, the good ones and the bad ones, because you can't really change what you don't acknowledge, right? Clear suggests this thing called a habit scorecard. You just list out every habit you have in your day.
So it's like taking stock, but for our actions. I get it. What kinds of things would even go on this scorecard? I feel like most of my day I'm on autopilot.
Exactly, and that's why this is so helpful. Think about your morning routine. Do you hit snooze like 5 times? Do you grab a healthy breakfast or skip it altogether? Are you scrolling through social media on the train or listening to a podcast? All habits. And by writing them down, you start to see those patterns.
I can already see how powerful this could be. So once you've got this list, what then?
Then you can start being strategic about introducing new habits. And one of the best techniques for this is habit stacking.
Habit stacking. What's that?
Super simple. You basically connect a new habit that you want to form with an existing one that's already part of your routine. Like, let's say you want to start meditating every day, but you just can't seem to find the time.
Yeah, that's me.
Well, you could stack it onto something you already do, maybe brushing your teeth. So after you brush your teeth, you meditate for like 5 minutes.
Oh, that's a great idea. You're not trying to build a whole new routine from scratch. You're using an existing structure to support the new habit.
Exactly. And the more you do this, the more those two actions get linked together in your mind. Clear even talks about this thing called the Diderot effect. He tells a story about this philosopher, Denis Diderot, who lived in poverty most of his life. Then Catherine the Great, she buys his entire library for a fortune.
Wow, talk about a life changes.
Right. So Diderot, he gets all this money and he buys this beautiful scarlet robe. Harmless enough, you'd think, right?
Yeah.
But this one change, this new possession, it sets off this chain reaction of new desires and spending habits. He starts feeling like he needs to upgrade his furniture, his art, everything.
So one shift can set off a whole avalanche. That's a little scary, but kind of exciting too if you think about applying that to positive change.
Exactly. It just shows how interconnected all our behaviors are, really. Okay, so we've got make it obvious. Now let's look at the second law, make it attractive. This is where we start using our brain's reward system to our advantage.
Ooh, okay, tell me more about that.
Our brains love dopamine, you know, that feel-good chemical that gets released when we're anticipating a reward. So we're way more likely to do something if we link it with something enjoyable.
That makes sense. So how do we make our habits more, well, appealing? How do we tap into that dopamine rush?
One way is this thing called temptation bundling. You basically pair something you want to do with something you need to do.
Okay, could you give me a real-life example of how that might work?
Let's say you love listening to your favorite podcast, but you've also been meaning to clean up your desk, but keep putting it off.
Oh yeah, that's me.
Right. So try bundling those two. You only allow yourself to listen to the podcast while you're cleaning your desk. Suddenly, that chore becomes way more fun.
That's brilliant. I can see how that would be huge, especially for the stuff I tend to avoid. So we've made it obvious, now we've made it attractive. What's next?
Now it's time to make it easy. This is all about reducing the friction for the good habits and making those bad habits harder to do.
Human nature, right.
Totally. We all go for the path of least resistance.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes just thinking about starting a new habit is exhausting.
Right. So Clear suggests this 2-minute rule. Basically, you break down a new habit into a starting ritual that takes less than 2 minutes to do. So instead of work out for an hour, it's put on my workout clothes.
I love how simple that is. It makes it so much easier to just get started.
Right. And once you've taken that first tiny step, you're much more likely to keep going. Clear gives this great example from the business world. This guy, John Henry Patterson, he noticed employee theft was a big problem because cash was just kept in open drawers.
Easy pickings.
Right. So how to fix it? He invests in the first cash register. Every transaction, the cash goes in, the receipt pops out, everything's locked up. Theft is practically impossible.
He designed his way out of the problem,
Mm,
made the desired behavior honesty the easiest option.
I love that. It's a brilliant example of how a simple change can lead to huge results. So we've got make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy. What about the last law? Make it satisfying.
Right, what about that one?
This is about reinforcement. We're way more likely to repeat an action if it feels good, even in a small way. We're hardwired to go for the immediate reward over the long-term benefits.
So it's not enough to know that working out will make me healthier later on. I need to make it enjoyable now.
Exactly. Clear shares this example of a soap company in Pakistan. They wanted people to wash their hands more, but just telling them wasn't working. So they made the soap more enjoyable to use great scent, foamy lather. Hand washing rates shot up.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, it's about making the process rewarding. So we've unpacked these 4 laws now, and I'm starting to see how all these small tweaks can really add up. What else does Clear go into in this excerpt?
Well, he goes even deeper than just changing our actions. He argues that real, lasting change, it comes from shifting our identity. We have to start seeing ourselves as the type of person who does these things.
Yeah, it's a whole other level.
That sounds pretty deep. I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear more about this connection between habits and identity.
Let's dig into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we're back and ready to dig into this whole idea of habits and identity. It's a pretty interesting concept.
It really is. Think about it. Your current habits, all those things you do almost automatically, they reflect who you think you are, right? If you see yourself as a procrastinator, well, guess what? You're probably going to keep putting things off. But if you start seeing yourself as someone organized, someone who takes action, your actions are going to start to line up with that.
So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm.
Our beliefs actually shape our actions.
Exactly. And Clear gives this really personal example. He had this terrible accident back in high school. Baseball bat to the face, broken nose, concussion, the whole works. Had to relearn basic stuff.
Oh, wow, this is awful.
It was. But he decided to focus on these tiny improvements, just like we've been talking about. He pushed himself a little each day, slowly getting his strength back. And it wasn't just physical recovery. He built this new identity, someone resilient, determined.
That's pretty inspiring. It shows how powerful it can be, even when facing something huge, to start small and just be consistent. So how do we actually shift our identity, to match the habits we want? That sounds like a big task.
It doesn't have to be overwhelming. One way is to ask yourself, what would I do if I were the kind of person who... And then fill in the blank with your desired habit. Like, let's say you want to be a writer.
Okay.
Ask yourself, what would a writer do? Maybe they'd write for 15 minutes every day, even when they don't feel like it. Maybe they'd join a writing group. By acting as if you're already that person, you start creating proof for yourself.
That's a really practical approach. It's not just wishing. It's doing stuff that matches who you want to be. And this makes me think of something else. Clear talks about the importance of our environment in shaping habits.
Oh, absolutely. Our surroundings, they have a huge impact on our behavior. Clear mentions this fascinating study done in a hospital cafeteria. This doctor, Anne Thorndike, she wanted to help people make healthier choices. But instead of lecturing them about nutrition, she got smart. She rearranged the drinks.
She rearranged the drinks, that's all.
Yep. Made the healthier options, like water and unsweetened tea, more visible, easier to grab. And guess what? People started choosing them more often without even realizing they were being nudged.
No way. That's amazing.
It is.
So if we want to change our habits, we need to change our space to support those goals. What are some practical things people can do?
Well, you mentioned you're trying to read more. What if you rearranged your living room, made your bookshelf more prominent? Or put a book right on your bedside table as a visual cue.
Oh, I like that.
Even unsubscribing from those tempting email newsletters can make a big difference.
Yeah, it's like removing the obstacles and clearing the path for what you want to do.
Exactly. Another cool idea Clear brings up is the habit contract. Have you ever heard of this?
Habit contract. That sounds intense. What's that all about?
It's a way to up the ante, make yourself more accountable, You write down your goal, set clear consequences for if you don't follow through, and get someone to hold you to it.
Like a personal trainer, but for habits.
Kind of. Clear gives the example of this entrepreneur, Brian Harris, who wanted to lose weight. He made a contract with a friend outlining his workout plan, his diet. If he didn't stick to it, he had to pay his friend a bunch of money.
Wow, that's motivation.
Yeah.
So we've got environment design, habit contracts. What else from this excerpt did you find helpful?
One that really resonated with me is this idea of finding your Goldilocks zone.
As in, not too hot, not too cold.
Mm.
What's that mean for habits?
It's about hitting that sweet spot where the things you're doing are challenging enough to keep you engaged, but not so hard that you get discouraged. When you're in that zone, you get into a flow state, when you're totally absorbed in what you're doing.
Oh, I love those moments. When you're so focused, you lose track of time.
Exactly. That's when we're at our best. Clear encourages us to experiment, adjust as we go, because what feels just right will change as we learn and grow.
Right, it's about adapting and always striving for that balance of challenge and enjoyment.
Right. Now, speaking of flow states, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the science behind how habits form in our brains.
Oh, yeah. We've been talking a lot about behavior, but I'm really curious about what's happening in our brains while all this is going on.
It's pretty amazing stuff. Every time you do something, there's this neural pathway in your brain that gets activated. And the more you repeat that action, the stronger that pathway gets until it becomes automatic. It's like walking through a forest. The more you walk a certain path, the clearer and easier it becomes.
So our habits are literally changing our brains. That's kind of wild.
It is. And that's why breaking bad habits can be so tough. Those pathways are well worn, like deep grooves. But the good news is, building good habits works the same way. It's literally reshaping your brain for the better.
It's like that saying, neurons that fire together wire together.
Exactly.
It shows how much power we have to shape our brains and our lives just through what we do repeatedly.
So to wrap up this part of our deep dive, I think it's important to remember that building good habits, it takes effort, but it's not just about willpower. It's about understanding the science, using these strategies, and ultimately changing how we see ourselves.
That's a great point. It's empowering to know we have more control than we might think. But like you said earlier, there are going to be challenges. What does Clear suggest for overcoming those bumps in the road?
Let's dive into that in the final part of our deep dive.
We're back for our final look at atomic habits. And I'm curious about what Clear has to say about those inevitable challenges we all face when we're trying to, change our behavior.
Yeah.
Because I know I struggle with willpower and motivation.
Oh yeah, everyone does. It's really important to remember that building good habits and breaking bad ones, it's not always this smooth upward climb. There will be setbacks. There will be moments of weakness, maybe even times you think, is this even worth it?
Oh yeah, totally been there. So what do we do about that? What's the antidote to self-doubt? How do we stay on track when things get tough?
Well, Clear really emphasizes self-compassion here. We're all human. We all mess up sometimes. The key is to not let a slip-up become a total derailment.
I know what you mean. You miss one workout and suddenly the whole plan feels ruined.
Right, that all or nothing thinking, that's what we got to avoid. Clear has this thing he calls the never miss twice rule.
Okay, never miss twice. I
Yeah.
like the sound of that. What's it all about?
It's pretty straightforward. You're allowed to miss once, but never 2 times in a row. So you miss your morning meditation. Happens, but you make sure you don't miss it again the next day.
Right, so it prevents those little slip-ups from becoming
Yeah.
like a whole cascade of missed days. It keeps the momentum going.
Exactly. It's about consistency, not perfection. Another thing people struggle with is just plain boredom. You start a new habit all excited, but then that novelty wears off and it starts feeling like a chore.
Oh, tell me about it. That initial excitement fades and you're like, I actually have to do this now.
And Clear actually says that boredom, not failure, is the biggest threat to success. So how do we fight that? He suggests a few things like finding ways to make the habit more challenging, adding variety to keep things interesting.
So it's about keeping that spark alive somehow, staying engaged and motivated.
Exactly. And it's also about connecting your habits to your values, your long-term goals. Why did you start this in the first place? Reminding yourself of that can really help when boredom sets in.
It's about that deeper purpose. It's not just checking things off a list.
Right. Now, speaking of deeper purpose, let's go back to this idea of identity that we touched on before. Remember, your habits are a reflection of who you believe you are. And if you want to change those habits, you got to start changing your self-image.
It's not enough to change our actions. We have to change what we believe about ourselves.
Exactly. Clear has this simple but powerful question to help with this. If I were the kind of person who insert your desired behavior, what would I do?
Oh, I like that. So if I wanted to be a morning person, instead of hitting snooze, I'd ask, what would a morning person do?
And they'd probably get out of bed and start their day. By acting as if you're that person, you start proving it to yourself.
You're rewiring your brain, basically,
Right.
aligning your actions with who you want to be.
You got it. And as we wrap up our deep dive into atomic habits, I think the biggest takeaway is this: success is not a destination, it's not a finish line you cross. It's a system, an ongoing process.
That's a great way to put it. It takes the pressure off trying to be perfect. It's about the journey of getting better, progress over perfection.
Absolutely. And it really highlights the importance of building sustainable systems, not just relying on motivation or willpower, which can come and go.
It's about a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right, one that supports growth and change.
Exactly. And that's a really powerful, hopeful message to leave our listeners with. You have more power than you think to shape your life. And it's not about these huge gestures, these overnight transformations. It's about those small, consistent choices you make day after day.
I love that. Taking ownership of your habits and using them to create the life you want. This has been such an insightful deep dive. Thank you so much for taking us through all of this.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, even the smallest changes, if you do them consistently, they can lead to really remarkable results. What small step will you take today?
That's a great question for us all to think about. Thanks for joining us on this journey through atomic habits. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep building those positive habits.